Hey guys, Argent here with a reactionary review of Dracula Untold. Now, I'm going to give a disclaimer before we actually start. This is not a good movie. I'm going to make it sound like a good movie because saying that it was mediocre isn't really that interesting. The movie is as a film and kind of as an action movie is pretty lame. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's far from the worst thing I've ever seen. The film does have a good visual style, and a couple of the action scenes and some of the special effects are okay. This isn't a good movie, though. I just don't want people to think I'm praising this as some kind of like great film. This is no The Departed. This is no Empire Strikes Back. This is kind of a campy action movie that, deliberately or not, and I suspect deliberately, happens to be really edgy. Um, I have an expression I use for someone who is alt right or is edgy, but we don't specifically know. I say they're on the spectrum, which is of course making fun of how many autistic people there are in the alt right, and it's just kind of a general term. Being autistic is almost synonymous with kind of having edgy political views. So I say they're on the spectrum, meaning you're somewhere on the edginess. So Dracula Untold is basically like This Is Europa the movie. Um, it's kind of explicitly pro-white, pro-Christian, pro-Western civilization. And despite this, and despite the fact that Dracula turns into like bats and destroys the entire Turkish army, this movie is actually substantially more historically accurate than pretty much any other portrayal I've ever seen of the Turks. So let's start with the movie, shall we? So the movie begins with Vlad Tepes. I think that's how you pronounce his name. The Prince of Wallachia and Transylvania. Now, Wallachia is, I believe, the land of the Vlachs. I believe that they are Proto-Romanians, although there's a lot of debate as to whether or not they're Proto-Romanians or Proto-Transylvanians, etc. He's also the Prince of Transylvania. For those of you who don't know, Transylvania is the western part of Romania, and it's an ongoing issue because the population there is majority Hungarian. So there's always a lot of dispute over what it's part of. There's also a lot of religious confusion because Romania is Orthodox and Hungary is mainly Catholic with some Protestants. During this time period, this is before the Reformation. Dracula, from my understanding, was Orthodox who converted to Catholicism in exchange for support from the Pope. How devout he was is an open question. Certainly, I don't think kind of the things he did are necessarily incompatible because he is a king, keep in mind, and kings always kind of have a different set of standards with what they have to do. But I think it's safe to say that, like most people from this period, he was at least somewhat religious, and this is reflected in the movie. So, we start with a bit of a prologue where it's revealed that as a child, Vlad was, I'll just refer to him as Vlad for the rest of this. He was a princely hostage of the Ottoman Empire and trained to be a soldier in the Ottomans' elite Janissary Corps. Just I guess maybe I'm on the spectrum. Anyways, so what happened during the Ottoman conquest of Eastern Europe was they would take young Christian boys. It was called the blood tax, as we'll see later. They would take the blood tax, which was basically young Christian boys. They'd take them into the army. They would torture, abuse them, and basically break them down psychologically. They would forcibly convert them to Islam, and they'd serve as the fanatical elites of the Ottoman army. The Janissaries were arguably the first professional standing army of all time, although I would say the Romans are probably better for that. They were also the first army to use gunpowder as the standard issue weapon. But yes, they were mostly Europeans who had been kidnapped, tortured, and forcibly converted. So let's see here. So he serves in the Ottoman army, where he becomes known as Vlad the Impaler, due to his habit of impaling his enemies on spears. Eventually sickened by his acts, he obtains a discharge from the Ottoman army and goes back to Wallachia and returns to rule his domains in peace, and they have a good era. One day in the forest, though, Vlad and his soldiers are discover a helmet in a stream, an Ottoman helmet to be precise. So they're afraid that an Ottoman scouting party is preparing a way for invasion. They follow the river to try and see where the helmet came from, maybe find the body of the Turkish soldier, and they come to a high mountain cave called Broken Tooth Mountain. I don't know if there's actually a mountain like that in Romania. Who knows? So they enter the cave, and one of them is attacked and killed by a vampire played by Charles Dance, who I can't believe they got to be in this movie. I guess he'll just be in anything. But geez, like, Charles Dance is such a mixed record. He's a truly great actor, but half the time he plays roles that are kind of like within his purview, and the other half of the time he gets sucked into doing crap like this. So his men are killed. Vlad succeeds in cutting the creature. However, the blood that is part of it dissolves in the sunlight. The creature does not pursue Vlad into the sunlight. Returning to his castle, Vlad learns from a local monk that the creature is a vampire. Now, his castle's pretty funny because it's basically a cathedral fortress. Why you would build a cathedral fortress, I don't know. I mean, it's just to LARP. And that's a good thing. But yeah, so he has like a cathedral fortress. It's like this massive Gothic cathedral with like fortifications around it, which is pretty badass. So let's see here. So, yeah, he learns the creature is a vampire who was once a man who summoned a demon from the depths of hell and gave it his soul in exchange for immortality. However, the demon tricked him and forced him to remain in the cave forever until he is released by someone who drinks his blood and then drinks the blood of the human. There's various versions as to how vampirism works. Kind of when we're dealing with kind of mystical, demonic vampires. Generally speaking, the vampire drinks the blood of the human, and then the human has to drink the blood of the vampire. Kind of in like a twisted variation of the Eucharist, where the priest drinks the wine and transforms it. So a bit like that, and then the person becomes a vampire. Whether or not vampires retain their souls, whether or not vampires are human or just possessed by demons, depends on the continuity. In Buffy, the demons lose their souls. The vampires lose their souls and are possessed by a demon instead. So let's see here. So the next day, he celebrates an Easter feast with his wife and his son. So he has like kind of an emotional scene with his wife. His wife is super hot. She's kind of a blonde woman with a touch of red to her hair. I always like women from this period because they have long hair. They haven't mutilated themselves with tattoos. They aren't obese. They have very feminine graces. All good things. And then he meets his son Ingris. I'll just call him Ingris because I can't into Romanian pronunciations. So they're celebrating Easter, good Christian holiday. I will note there's very prominent Christian symbolism displayed throughout this. Just like icons, religious artwork, crosses, buildings that look like churches. This movie is kind of a celebration of European culture. All the people in it are like very noticeably European and have very kind of interesting regional features, I suppose you could say. So, an Ottoman contingent arrives unexpectedly at the castle. Vlad offers them the usual tribute payment of silver coins, but the emissary notes that a battalion of Ottoman scouts has gone missing, implying that Vlad had them killed. Vlad claims he did not kill them and so the emissary demands an additional tribute of 1,000 boys to be trained as janissaries through the blood tax. Vlad refuses, but his army is too small, and he is no match for the Turks. Marina believes, his wife, which is similar to Mina on purpose, believes that because Vlad and Mehmed's history together as children, Mehmed II is, I believe, the let me just double check this. I believe he's the conqueror. Yes, he's the one who conquered Constantinople. So he's pretty much one of the biggest villains in European history. Mehmed II and Vlad were friends, and they were raised together fighting in the Ottoman army. He was the one who conquered Constantinople and reduced it to the ground. So they thought that he might show Vlad mercy. So Vlad goes and begs him. He offers to take the place of the boys. He basically begs Mehmed for mercy. He says, I'm like the best soldier you have. I'll come back. I'll be the dragon again. I'll be the killer. So Mehmed says no, and then he demands that Vlad's son join in addition. The Sultan sends an emissary to bring Vlad's son. Vlad has a big fight with his wife as he is sending his son to meet with the emissary and the Ottoman soldiers. The thing is that Vlad has a difficult choice to make because if he refuses to pay the blood tax, the Turks will invade, slaughter his people, burn their land to the ground, and take slaves anyways. So as a king, he's torn between showing strength and his duty as a man to protect his child and wife, and his duty to his people. So Vlad goes to meet the emissaries and tells his wife to trust him. So let's see here. So he is unarmed, but his son, afraid for him, runs to him because he's so afraid of the Turks. Let's see here. His son tells him that he will join the Sultan's army, though, and be a man. Vlad goes over the Turks. Let's see here. The Turks, he tells his son to go run back to his mother, so he takes the emissary's sword and kills the entire group of Ottoman soldiers, saving his son and delaying the paying of the blood tax for now. Knowing that his slaughtering of the Ottoman Empire's emissaries will lead to war, Vlad goes to Broken Tooth Mountain to get the help of the vampire. Once he is inside, though, the vampire asks Vlad why he has returned. Vlad tells him that he needs the power of the vampire so he can defeat the Ottoman army. The vampire tells him there are consequences and offers him some of his blood, which will temporarily give Vlad the power of a vampire. If he can resist the intense urge to drink human blood for 3 days, he will turn back into a human. Otherwise, he will remain a vampire forever and will be at the service of the older vampire. Vlad accepts the offer and drinks the vampire's blood as he goes through an experience and transforms. Waking up afterwards, Vlad discovers he has been given superpowers, basically, including the ability to transform into a flock of bats, but his sun burns in direct sunlight. When he returns to the castle, the Ottoman army attacks, and then we're treated to probably one of the most cathartic scenes ever, in which Vlad slaughters the entire Ottoman army, using his super strength skills and by turning into bats. Which is good, because the Ottoman army had just been rampaging across Europe, enslaving, slaughtering the population. The Ottoman Empire is known for probably creating more genocides than any other power in history. Over its experience, it frequently engaged in ethnic cleansing. The entire system was built on slavery. It was one of the most evil, horrific kingdoms ever to be founded, pretty much. Which was made worse because most kingdoms it didn't last that long. The Mongol Empire in its completed form only lasted a century or two. The Ottoman Empire in one form or another lasted 500 years. So he slaughtered the entire army, which was pretty good. So he sends the remaining subjects to a monastery on the edge of a mountain where he believes they will be safe. Vlad is ambushed by another group of Ottoman soldiers, and Vlad kills them. However, the people begin to realize that he has superpowers, and it makes them suspicious for logical reasons. Let's see here. Okay, so let's see here. The next day, they manage to reach the monastery. His wife discovers about the whole vampire thing, but she accepts that he will become human again at the end of the 3-day period, because Vlad decides he's not going to drink blood. So they get to the monastery, so the monks realize who he is, and they trap him in a building and attempt to burn him. However, the smoke from it blocks out the sun temporarily and allows him to come outside. We then get a big speech about how he traded his soul to save his people and did what any good king would do. So it's a pretty... if you've seen the trailer, it was in the trailer. Let's see. So Vlad was going to kill his people because of their lack of gratitude, but his wife succeeds in calming him down, which is kind of the traditional kind of female thing to do. It's the duty of the man to create and destroy. It's the duty of the woman to kind of moderate. That's kind of the problem with having female politicians and female voters, is they kind of want to just moderate everything. They want everything to just be compassionate. They don't always really think in the long term. But in traditional societies, generally speaking, the societies run as a patriarchy. So the man tends to control things outside of the home, but the woman tends to control things within the home. Women in traditional societies have an immense amount of power dealing with the family and dealing with their husbands. So she's kind of portraying, taking the traditional kind of female role of a wife and moderating her husband and kind of preventing his kind of masculine impulses from getting out of hand. I mean, that's kind of how society is supposed to work, but now we kind of have the inverse almost, where males are being forced to try and moderate the crazed demands of feminists. So, let's see here. That night, the Ottoman army marches at the monastery. Vlad transforms into an enormous swarm of bats to repel them. However, it turns out the soldiers are actually a decoy force, and a handful of Turks infiltrate the monastery, slaughtering many of the inhabitants and kidnapping his son. His wife attempts to defend his son and falls from the edge of the monastery wall. Vlad is incapable of saving her in time and has to watch his beautiful wife die in his arms. The only person other than his son he's ever really loved. The only person who gave him kind of a sense of peace from the horrific things he did in his youth and the torture he underwent. So his dying wife asks her to drink her blood so that he can save her son. Now this is kind of how the legend of Vlad Dracula is, that he, or Vlad Tepes, or however you pronounce his name, is that he ate up that in the misery caused by the destruction of his people, his kingdom, Ottoman slavery and death. In his despair, he drank up the blood of his homeland and became a vampire. So, that more or less happens. He feasts on his wife. I think it's done in a rather tasteful way. If I remember correctly, he just kind of bites her and sucks her blood out. He doesn't, like, eat her or something weird like that. So Vlad returns to the monastery and turns his the remainder of his soldiers into vampires as well. Okay. So at the Ottoman camp, Mehmed prepares for a massive invasion of Europe through the Balkans and Hungary. It specifically states he wishes to take all of Central and eventually march on Western Europe, which is more or less what happened. I mean, obviously Dracula didn't stop them or he kind of did actually. The severe kind of brutality and toughness of Dracula and his reign over Wallachia, and his constant determination, because Dracula was defeated many times. His army kept getting driven back. He kept losing to the Turks, etc. But each time he came back and continued to fight them off. So he did actually hold up the Ottomans for a couple decades, if I recall correctly, and that gave a lot of the other European powers time to repair and rebuild. In particular, Hungary had just launched a crusade not too long ago and needed some time to rebuild its armed forces. So Mehmed is preparing to invade Europe, and this is where I say this is Europa. You have the foreign Muslim invader who, I think he looks really Middle Eastern, who's invading and is mass murdering and enslaving the white Christian people of Europe, and is going to destroy them, is going to impose his foreign barbaric culture on them, and reduce them to slavery. Does this kind of sound familiar? Maybe kind of like something that's happening today in Europe? Yeah? Yeah, it's kind of a very timely film. It's not a good film, but it's very timely. So, Vlad's vampires arrive and massacre the soldiers. Vlad goes in to fight Mehmed, and we have an awesome fight scene. Mehmed is in his tent where he's surrounded by the silver that he's plundered from all the various peoples of Europe. So the silver weakens Vlad and makes him reduces him to kind of normal human strength, and enables Mehmed to fight on equal strength with him. He also uses a silver sword. So let's see here. So Vlad is getting his ass kicked. The silver sword actually can hurt him. So he's about to drive a stake through his heart, but Vlad turns into a flock of bats and evades him. Taking the name Dracula, son of the devil, he kills Mehmed with the stake and drinks his blood, fully succumb to the savagery of his vampire condition. It's very cathartic to watch Mehmed II die. I mean, if anyone really deserved it, it was him. He had destroyed the last remnant of Rome. To me, Rome is kind of synonymous with Western civilization. It's the great block through which we are all hewn. Roman religion, Roman philosophy, Roman architecture, Roman characters, most notably, are all quintessential parts of kind of Europe, particularly Western Europe. Rome is the West, and Mehmed is the one who destroyed the last successor state of the Roman Empire. So as I leave the tent, Dracula and his son are confronted by the other vampires, who demand that his son be killed because he is human. The monk who had previously led the monks against Vlad appears and keeps the vampires at bay with a Christian cross. Once again, strong Christian symbolism, and we have monks. Dracula gives his son to the monk and tells him to take him away and be safe. He then uses his power to clear the black clouds in the sky. So the sunlight burns the vampires to dust while Dracula collapses into a charred corpse. We then get an awesome scene, kind of an epilogue scene, where it says, "And Vlad saved Europe from invasion from the Muslim Turkish hordes." So, I think it literally says the great capitals of Europe were saved from Turkish invasion by the strength and abilities of Vlad. So then his son becomes the new Prince of Wallachia, and Vlad is assumed dead. However, the vampire takes Dracula into the shadows and revives him with more blood. In the present, we cut to the present day, and Vlad is still alive. He meets a woman named Mina, who is played by the same actress as his wife, and views her as a reincarnation. They have a conversation about a line of poetry that they remember from their previous life together. The vampire cursed Vlad, now healed in a more human form and still alive, watches from afar and follows them, and anticipates what he has planned for Dracula in the future, saying, "Let the games begin." Now there will not be any kind of sequel to this. Maybe there will. Let me just look at this for a second. It's on the edge of earning enough to start a modest franchise. I'd like to see a sequel. It wasn't a good movie. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of attractive kind of archetypical Europeans, like blondes. Vlad himself is an interesting looking guy. Let's see, who's Luke Evans? He's from the United Kingdom. he has a very kind of interesting look to him. I actually thought that the actor who played him was like Hungarian because he has kind of that very, to me at least, he kind of has that Carpathian look to him. I thought he was a good choice. I thought he did a pretty good job. I thought his wife was very beautiful, beautiful blonde woman. It is very appropriate. It just very much feels like kind of a bunch of edgy guys got together and designed a movie. Like we have hot white people, we have good looking white people, we have lots of like Christianity, Christian symbolism, just kind of a celebration of the beauty of the Western people and lifestyle. We kind of have these foreign Muslim Turkish invaders coming in, stealing shit, enslaving people, just kind of blowing things away. So I think people liked Luke Evans and thought he did a good job. They thought the story was good. I think it was just very poorly implemented. This could have been a really good movie. They just kind of fucked up. As it is, though, it's extremely cathartic, a whole lot of fun, and it really does feel like some LARPy, like Pole guys or some like LARPy This Is Europa guys got a chance to make their own movie and were largely successful. So I recommend watching this movie. It's kind of mediocre, but it's mediocre at least in a fun way. We at least got to watch Vlad Dracula just kind of own the Turks. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. And like it literally says, he saved Europe. So Vlad, we owe you a debt of gratitude for doing that. This is Argent Templar, signing